Good morning and welcome. It's a real pleasure to join the EPIC conference today. I'll just attempt to share my screen with you so we can run through my presentation today. I would like to talk today about sensory marketing and specifically how you can use print and different print effects to increase consumer satisfaction when they interact with products and packaging. Firstly, I will talk about very briefly about who we are and what we do. Then I'll dive into some of the consumer psychology on how we shop for FMCG products. And that will be followed by a deep dive into some of the sensory science and with practical examples of successful products and how they use different sensory cues for consumers. So, the Retail Institute, if you haven't heard of us before, is a research centre which is based at Leeds Beckett University. We've been around for about 22 years, and since our beginnings, we were supporting businesses with innovation. And this is exactly what we do to this day. What you would call a knowledge exchange platform. So we really aim to take the knowledge out of the academia and combine it with the knowledge of practitioners like yourselves to create better outputs in the future, better scientific outputs. Our main themes are around, as you would expect, consumer behaviour. One of the most historical kind of topics we research is packaging. Initially, we were very deeply involved in material sciences when we first started. However, as the years have gone by, we created different expertise across different departments of the university. So we still, of course, do life cycle analysis. We, of course, still provide retailers with a map of future biopolymers or materials that they may wish to work on in years to come. But a lot of that work is also about how consumers interact with the goods and how you can add value to and set the right expectations of your product experience through the medium of packaging. Future of retail is another topic that's very interesting, especially now when we see this huge transition. You must all have heard the news about the M&Ms yesterday. This is one of the things we've just been commenting yesterday to Yorkshire Post about that this was really, this is not something new really. We have been seeing transition in the retail for a lot of years, and we still do. And we've always been talking about how omni-channel is the future, and we certainly see that now. Apologies, something happened to my clicker, so I can only scroll down for whatever reason. We do three different things. We do applied research, so we will have academic colleagues who companies buy out of teaching or research to resolve a problem for them. We quite often work with multidisciplinary teams with psychology, sustainability institute, graphic design, so there's a combined teams working on issues in the practitioners' world. We've got a membership web network, which is really a useful tool for anybody in R&D. Asda, Waitrose, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Cavaris, and BASF are example of our clients. And of course, we do academic research. I'll just really briefly cover that. We do anything from market intelligence to LCA for products or of course, consumer insights. And this is just a small sample of some of our clients. Some of them existing, some of them projects that we've done in the past. Now, so I'll talk today about sensory marketing specifically. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term at all, but I'll first introduce the topic of sensory science by just giving you a few insights into behavioral psychology of consumer and shopper. So when we talk about how consumers shop, we talk about the external and internal drivers. So internal drivers are those personal motivations that make us purchase certain goods and not the others. So these can be hedonistic if we take pleasure from consuming or interacting with a certain product. They can be utilitarian, so if you are buying 5 litres of industrial bleach to make sure your house is COVID free, this will be surely just utilitarian. But there's also other factors, and one of those factors is gifting. It's a season for gifting coming up our way, and I find that area particularly interesting because I think this is when sensory marketing actually does come in a little bit. I always give this example, and forgive me if you have heard this before, but when it comes to, for example, purchasing something for somebody else, quite often we're driven through quite a complex process. If you imagine that you have been invited to your boss's 50 years anniversary party, not now, of course, maybe in March when we're all vaccinated, and they're a whiskey drinker, you're not a whiskey drinker, so you go into the retail environment and you've got this wall of product in front of you and you're really kind of weighing up different products that you maybe don't know much about. So you'll be looking at the high shelf, you'll be looking at your Macallan whiskey in beautiful packaging, and you think, well, you know, that's going to say about me that I've been severely overpaid for a number of years. Then you look at the lower shelf and you see the Beefeater to Pink gin, and you think, oh, you know, or you see other, let's say, whiskey product, Asda's Own, which looks beautiful, but actually, oh, am I going to communicate that I'm a cheapskate? So you're going to focus somewhere on the middle or the similar price point, and then what's really going to come into play in what the packaging is communicating to you about the product and about you and what you want to portray to the person you're buying it for. But it's really those external triggers, you know, the packaging information on pack, the conscious and subconscious cues that you put in there, the information that the brand has influence over, such as price sensitivity, and obviously the strength of the brand that really you can influence, or if you are a brand owner, you can influence, but you can contribute to influencing. So in psychology and behavioral economics, the endowment effect is a hypothesis that people ascribe more value to things they already own. Now, if you ever tried to put anything on eBay that really isn't worth it, but you really insist it's £10 starting bid, you will really know what I'm talking about. And this is also true for products that we pick up in store from a shelf that attract our eye, that we want to investigate, for example, closer. So we know that research tells us that a customer that picks up a product in store is 96% more likely to purchase it. There's different actually percentages in different research sources, but ultimately all of them go between 80 and 60%. So really most businesses really seek to premiumize their product in some way to stand out on shelf because they want to achieve that objective. And premiumization can be achieved in numerous ways. Through differentiation, for example, or by using premium packaging materials or visual and tactile effects on pack. So the challenge that you have is that really you are trying to compete in a very crowded space. And if your brand doesn't use the right colors, shapes, formats, you may not really be hugely visible. And that is a challenge for anybody who brings a new product or maybe who has an existing product on the market. Now, we know that customers that focus on a product for more than 3 seconds are 63% more likely to buy the product. Those customers, as I said, who pick the product up are very highly likely, up to 93%, to actually convert it into purchase. Now, subjects of studies like this make those decisions about what they purchase in as little as 313 milliseconds, so fractions of a second. But when it comes to the favorite food, we are even more focused. We can make it in 404 milliseconds. Now, how can you draw the eye? Now, consumers perceive more unique products as premium products. And consumers base the judgment on the product quality through their perceptions of packaging. In other words, what you put on pack really sets the expectations of what customers will find inside. Now, there's different ways to premiumize. And based on some of the still ongoing and current packaging trends, there's 4 different ways that you can achieve premiumization. Now, for example, extraordinary differentiation can be achieved by breaking the rules for your category. And this is, so you can use alternative formats, alternative types of packaging, and or alternative quality materials, if you like. Now, this is quite an interesting example that I'm giving you here, because it's not the one that I think is particularly successful, maybe, in displaying that, although it is in another way. And maybe this is just cultural. So this is a Skull vodka, and when you see it on the shelf in the retail environment, it's really a beautiful piece of design that stands out and that communicates really well that it's a pure quality spirit. For me, I'm originally Polish, so I remember back in the 90s, we used to have those products on shelves, it was a product that was an industrial alcohol, and it had a big skull with some bones crossed at the bottom to indicate that it's a poisonous product because there were some additives in it to make it not very digestible. But ultimately, people that had alcohol issues still were buying that product nonetheless and drinking it. But for me, when I see the skull on an alcoholic product, it still has the connotation that it might be particularly poisonous. But I think nobody else maybe has that. So in many ways, this is a successful representation of differentiation. The only trick with differentiating is that you still want to be recognizable within your category. So maybe the rule is break the rules, but don't break the rules too much. Now, when it comes to minimalist design, this is also what I would call a Nordic school of design. This is a beautiful example of really simplifying the product and making, maybe even an everyday FMCG product such as water looking really premium. You may have noticed in films that particular type of water is appearing quite often as a prop. Now, when it comes to authenticity, this is also a really interesting example. So this is not a soap, obviously, from 1850s. This is a look of a soap that has been made maybe to tick two boxes. One of them to communicate authenticity or certain heritage of the product that you're marketing, but also one that communicates through supple, kind of tactile, paper-like material that it's sustainable. Now, this is tricky because maybe I imagine that a product like that will have to have some barrier properties so that the grease from the actual product doesn't seep into the packaging and doesn't stain it. So I imagine it's probably not recyclable. So there's a balance, of course, with this particular product. Now, the last example is straightforward. It's high quality materials. And this is, can I just say, people can really tell quality. So if you're using embossing, better print, matte versus silk effect on packaging, or those kind of eye-catching, effects like a gold or copper, consumers do really react to those in a sensorial way. We know a particular example where one of the members that we work with, they sell outer packaging to a luxury brand, which they do a print effect which is golden in a packaging. And that particular high brand, which a coat of that brand, let's just say, costs £700, used to do the packaging with e-commerce to be very plain, and actually consumers open it, and instead of the wow factor and the first moment of truth, they have, oh, okay. So they had to really upgrade the e-commerce packaging, which is so important right now, to kind of have that innocent, safe look on the outside of a cardboard box, but inside you really communicate the premiumness to your consumer through those kind of visual effects and inks that you can apply. So just to go back to a little bit of science. So every product, sorry, I've lost something. So every purchase decision on a product is really based on the rational and emotional brain. It's not just a rational decision, even if sometimes we think it is. It's obviously different if we're repurchasing the products we used to that we like. But a lot of the new purchases or repurchases of updated products that they've been innovated on are really made through our kind of emotive side as well. So we've got this cognition, this kind of brain response to something, but there's also this subconscious reaction and communications that we do in packaging through kind of the subconscious side of our brain. And that emotional side is very powerful because the purchase decision and the interaction with the product really can embed a certain beliefs and attitudes and behaviors towards a product and brand specifically. And you've got really entire sensory suite to truly create memorable products. And this is auditory engagement, so olfactory, we've got vision, we've got sense of smell, we've got sense of touch, and we of course got a sense of taste. So just to give you some of the statistics for different senses, how they contribute to different senses, 83 of marketing communications appeal to just one sense, to our sense of vision. That's how we design, that's how marketers tend to work on that basis. Sense of smell, however, contributes to 75% of our emotions that are influenced by that particular sense. Now, this is really interesting, and you may notice if you ever walk into your family home, or if you ever smell something that suddenly evokes, like a perfume that suddenly evokes a memory of somebody, or a memory of certain foods that you had as a child, the olfactory sense sits at the back of our brain and is really closely linked to memory. So I'll show you, there's really a lot of good examples of how olfactory can be really positively ascribed to a particular brand and really wake up those senses, and positive, hopefully, it's not always positive, of course, positive and negative that it can evoke, but it can really strongly evoke some experiences and memories in our mind. Now, 65% of people who experience mood change when exposed to positive sound, it's a really strong stat for engaging the sense of sound. And you may think, oh, well, how would you do that in packaging? But actually, if you think of an Apple box, and I don't mean, I mean the technology Apple, that suction where you lift the cover of, you know, the box that your new iPad or iPhone arrives at, this is engineered. This is a sound that, you know, any sound of clicking, if you've got a sound, so there's different methods to do it in research, but in automotives, the sound with which your doors in your car lock, this is part of the sensory attire. This is engineered so that it brings you a satisfaction, a sense, okay, this is safely locked. It has a job to do. So you can really play on those features in FMCG as well. And a sense of touch, a customer that picks up a product in store is 96% more likely to purchase it, and taste, 80% of the flavors we taste come from what we smell. And if you have been affected by COVID and you haven't got a sense of smell, you will really know what I mean by not being able just to absolutely taste anything. Now, I'm just going to go to the first sense, which is that visual engagement. So there's of course a lot to play at, and I want to say that the reason why our vision is the way it is, that is something that really evolved through the millennia to help us distinguish edible fruits from the backgrounds, or, you know, this is a hunter-gatherer thing. You know, if you pick the berries, those berries, you will die, and if you don't pick those berries, you will be fed and happy. Unless, of course, you've got some murderous attempts in your back of your mind, then you won't be going at them poisonous ones. But ultimately, this is really to help us. The sense of vision was to help us to find our way in the natural environment, and it still is to this day a function that we do. So if a product attracts a visual attention, consumers are more likely to touch them. So therefore, and you want to touch them because you want that endowment effect. You want them to pick it up. So there is something around the salience or noticeability of a product. If the packaging's low-level feature increase the kind of visual attraction, aesthetics of the product that attract us to it. So the more saturated and higher quality of color in comparison to its surrounding, the more it is, of course, visible. The red and green axis, which you can see the image here, is the most salient color contrast, whereas the yellow and blue is less so. Food descriptions intended to appeal to multiple senses generate improved taste perceptions than single sense perceptions. So if you use the vision and also the words combined with it, you will get a much stronger message. Images depicting the healthiness of food also influence food perception. To give you an example, there was a study that showed different group of participants an image of a burger. There were exactly the same images with one exception. One had a piece of broccoli next to it. And what we found is that the one that had that little piece of broccoli was evaluated on average on about 100 calories less than the one without the broccoli. So we've got some embedded perceptions if there's some green added to the colors. Now, emotional information such as tastiness or positioned towards the bottom. Apologies, I just got. Oh, here we go. Emotional information such as tastiness positioned towards the bottom of packaging is processed more fluently than on top. Rational information such as healthiness positioned towards the top of the packaging is processed more fluently than at the bottom. Powerful brands, premium brands, like you can see Godiva here, are preferred when logo is positioned towards the top of packaging, and the reverse is true for less powerful brands. So, for example, if you've got Lidl or brand, then you may find that discounted brands will be branding the products a little bit differently. Products with images at the bottom and right are perceived to be heavier. So this is beneficial for some products and the others. As you can see, the Leibniz biscuits, they have used that particular image on the right-hand side, on the lower hand, and that image orientation really supports this kind of, something of heavier weight for some products, not for all product categories, but something of the heavier weight on the right will communicate to the consumer, this is, heavier, therefore more valuable. Now, also, the middle example is about elongation bias, and this is something you may have already heard of. So this is about that consumers perceive tall containers to contain more than short and wider ones. Consumers rarely read volume or weight information, so they really take those sensory cues from the shapes of the objects. Also, when it comes to graphic design on actual packaging, if you look at the Godiva example, rounded shapes best convey taste that are sweet that are sweet, and the angular shapes best conveys tastes that are a little bit sour, perhaps, or sharper. There's also a match between person's handedness, left or right-handedness, that increases mental stimulation and therefore purchase intention. So let me just see if there's something I've missed. So this is, oops, sorry, I'm now running with that. So just to give you a few other examples how some of this is used in packaging. This is an example which is quite famous actually of 7-Up that has increased the yellow in their packaging of about 50% more yellow was added to the can. And instantly people started complaining to the brand saying that the taste has changed, that it's much more limey, that it's much more lemony, and it actually is not the traditional 7-Up taste. The truth was that, of course, the brand did not change the recipe at all. They have solely changed the packaging. And so it just shows you the really strong connection. And we have seen that as well. We've done a piece where we've actually changed the packaging of a product that influenced the perception of flavor of packaging, of the product inside, which is really interesting point psychologically. Now, when it comes to also to products that communicate that they're low calorie or free from, the pastel and light color communicates, of course, that the product is healthy, but it also communicates that it's not very tasty. So if you've got a product like that, you may wish to reconsider how you're approaching the branding of that product. Vibrant colors create higher expectations of sweetness, fattiness, and saltiness, while the light and watered down colors give impression of a healthier product, but it doesn't always mean that consumers will, of course, like that. Now, this unfortunate picture on the right is really just to show you, to reinforce the point about the setting of the expectations. So whatever your packaging communicates, it really needs to match what the product experience is like for what we call it congruence, for successful kind of embedding of the same concept throughout different consumer experience stages. Now, I'll just move on to olfactory, and I'll just really cover that really briefly. So this is about a sense of smell. So printed food visuals that include a scent increases person's salivation and desire to eat, and to eat perhaps more food than normally. Merely asking individuals to imagine the smell of the advertised product can lead to their desiring more when it's accompanied by a picture. Now, just to give you an example, one study showed an image of a cookie and didn't ask participants to imagine their smell. Then another group was asked to imagine the smell as well. They were shown a picture of a cookie. And the group that had the double stimulus of the olfactory, so imagining of the smell and the vision, they started salivating. So there was a really powerful link with actually imagining of the smells, which is what packaging can do by evoking certain shapes or images to make you think of certain fragrances. Scent can also be, as you know, delivered through secondary and packaging, such as scented tissue paper or scratch and sniff, but there's some risks with that. I have seen this really effectively done in like house fragrances, but perhaps I haven't seen that really well done in food, perhaps with exception of coffee, not very much so in chocolate. So until those smells can really, that technology is there to really support the purchase buying behavior with the right scent, perhaps you shouldn't go there. But for some products, this is the absolute way to go. Scented candles, home products that you can kind of sniff before you buy are really effective. And as I've mentioned, scent can really induce memory recall, so you can really play on that. Now, just to show you how does that convert to money, which is really what each brand owner wants to know. So the economic effects of sensory marketing have been measured by Unilever. They've for the product Dove. So research consultancy that they've hired, Millward Brown, estimated that the smell of the brand contributes to $63 million. The touch accounted for $34 million, and sight only for 14. So the sense of smell at 63 million was the most powerful kind of sensory cue for that particular product. Now, Singapore Airlines is another brand that uses sensory, and of course other airlines do that as well, but I believe they were the first ones to use it effectively. So they've got the scent called Floridian Waters. So it's perfume which is worn by flight attendants. You also get it sprayed on a hot towel when you get it, when you arrive at the plane, and all the elements of the service also included. And this is to embed a really positive, coherent message with, if you smell that smell, you should relax, we will look after you, type of thing. Also in 2015 in the UK, Waitrose has tested sensory smells in one of its aisle prior to Christmas. And what they found, so it was some kind of, I don't remember what was the exact smell, but it was something to do with spiced apple or a scent like that. So quite a neutral, not a food smell from what I remember. And what they found is that the unplanned purchases in the aisles that had certain smells increased by 43%. So when you go into the bakery, when you go to Lidl, if you have a shop in Lidl, you walk through the door and you've got more than, not just in Lidl, other supermarkets do that too. You've got bread straight from the front, and you've got that beautiful smell of freshly baked bread as you walk in. This is of course not, as you expect, coincidence. It's to make you hungry. Haptics is a particular sense that is probably of interest to you in print industry. We know that touching a product has been found to increase the confidence in product evaluation. So we evaluate the quality of a product based on a sense of touch. It improves accuracy of quality judgment, influences our product and purchase decision. It also, most importantly, perhaps for some, increases willingness to pay by consumers. If you use the right packaging, you may simply increase the value of the product inside, which I know it's straightforward to you, but we know that from science that this is what the studies have proven. And of course, it supports the endowment effect if the cognitive evaluation is positive. So this is really, I'm not going to give you too many examples, but I will tell you about one interesting one. There was a company that has changed, due to environmental strategy, they've changed the water bottles to a lighter PET, which meant that that particular product became quite loud, quite flimsy, to touch, and instantly they've experienced a drop in sales because consumers had a different perception of quality purely because of that tactile effect of the new material that was used. So it's a tricky balance when we talk about circular economy. So marketing message that incorporates a sense of touch or touch elements is more persuasive than one that does not. And also important that some individuals have a really high need for touch. And people over 50 have decreased sensory tactility in the hands, but there's a lot of people who have higher need for touch. There's a lot of women that shop with the hands, so females are more predisposed to shop in that way. So if you're a female, if you go into a store and you touch all the fabrics, then you will know why. But also, females and males evaluate tactility in different ways. So males, for example, would find leather as a more premium material. Females will find silk as a more premium material in haptics. Just to give you an example of a study that my colleague has done. This is a colleague who sits actually in another school, and she did impact of haptics on magazine consumption. So she has taken this magazine, which is a subscription magazine, and she created a different version of it. And she was trying to measure physiological reactions to that particular magazine when on two different paper stocks. So one was matte and thicker, and second was silk and lighter. And what she really found out when she did the study, and she measured the pulse, she measured the perspiration, and she obviously measured the qualitative responses to the actual product. Now, what she has found that there was increased sign of increased pleasure when consumers interacted with the higher quality stock. They trusted the content of the magazine more when it was on a higher quality stock. They had higher willingness to pay, up to £10. I believe that magazine is about £4, but they were willing to pay up to £10 for a high quality magazine because the perception of the product has changed. They instantly, even though the content was the same, they trusted the content more in the high quality material. They wanted to keep the magazine. It almost became a collector's item. And also the value perception, the keep versus throw away, was important. Now, this is just a few examples of haptic engagement. I'll just maybe talk about one of these. I'm just conscious I'm probably slightly heading towards the end of my presentation, and I've still got a few slides to go. So Orangina, the brand, incorporated haptic engagement on bottles. So they imitated the skin peel of the actual fruit on the bottle to enhance the perception of flavor. And Naked is a brand that actually used ink effects to change the color of the product as you touch it. So it almost is blushing as you touch it. And of course, it works with the whole concept of the product. So that was very effective. Briefly, auditory engagement is about creating sounds, and sounds are not just in your crinkly packaging or smooth packaging. It's also in the names of your products. So, as I said, certain sounds, so sharper sounds might be associated with products that are more salty or sour. Rounded kind of words work better for products who are offered sweetness or kind of supple flavors. Graphic signs. So, as you see on this example of Dorito, I think it's a really effective use of auditory engagement. So, not only packaging has a sound, which kind of corresponds with the experience of actually consuming Doritos. Also, you see the bright colors, triangular shapes that correspond with that particular kind of product experience, and you've got those triangular images in graphic design as well to support your message. These are just a few examples of how this is effectively implemented. So in terms of the beer, you know, how something closes or opens is a really good indicator of for consumers of whether something's fresh. So it's a cue to freshness. It's really the same with Snapple, which is an American brand of a pub drink. Now, aerosols are interesting because aerosol, if you ever try to spray an aerosol behind someone's ear, you will know that it's not massively a positive sound. It's actually a sound subconsciously to flee, so to run. So I know there's different sounds that you can play, but there's actually, it's worth considering if you're a brand. I will not talk much about sensory congruence other than mention that you can really have such a powerful brand that a sheer shape or color of your brand can really communicate, be really recognized in consumers' mind, and can represent, you know, so a tune like McDonald's tune, it's enough for you to hear the little whistling, that know that this is McDonald's without any words whatsoever. So if you embed a positive sound or a positive shape, if you like, that can really, neuroscience shows us that that congruence really converts to positive behaviors. So online, one of our colleagues, I will only briefly touch on that. It's possible to do sensory online, and it's so important in the e-commerce. And I'll say that the words are your toolkit, and high quality images are your toolkit for that. And just to close on a couple of examples. This is a study we did for Twinings, Associated British Foods. This is we did a series of educational podcasts with our professor of sensory science specifically about this product category. And as a result, the innovation team at Twinings have gone away and created a range of herbal teas, and they have been hugely successful with that range up to date. What I want to say that if you buy a Twinings tea, for example, a breakfast tea or any other, just look out for that little click, how the cardboard box really clicks as you close it, because it's really a beautiful sound. So I would really encourage you to look at those details of how packaging can create the sensory auditory engagement. Allied Glass did a piece on premiumization. We did a piece of premiumization for them because as I said, when you purchase alcohol, perhaps one you're not familiar with, we've got a lot of embedded communications within a mind of what we look. For example, heavier bottles may be communicating in some categories of alcohol higher quality, and there's loads of little findings like that. So print and packaging, really important. We did a study for a coatings and ink specialist, and they were really wanting to understand the perfume and alcohol category for secondary packaging. And what was interesting, some of the coatings they had that they believed provide that sensory engagement maybe didn't turn out to be true quite in the consumer setting. But what was positive is that some of the inks and coatings that we identified as those that actually increase consumer satisfaction, those were much cheaper to produce. So that certainly was a good news for the brand. So I will conclude on that, as I know I've run out of time, but thank you very much. If you've got any further questions or if you wish to contact me on email, you're most welcome to do that. And thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olga.